next session. And Pallaviji, Nitin Bhai and the team. And Pallaviji, I'll make you the host of this session. Here we go.
Thank you, Sunilji. Thank you, Prakashji, for such a wonderful session. Radhe Radhe, good morning, good evening to each one of you. Welcome to Daily Wisdom from Bhagavad Gita session. Radhe Radhe, Nitinji, over to you.
Radhe Radhe. Thank you, Pallaviji. And welcome everyone to today's edition of Daily Wisdom from Bhagavad Gita. Thank you, Prakashji, for a wonderful session like always. So welcome everyone. Let's get started with our Daily Wisdom from Bhagavad Gita session. Today we have, we'll not have the Soul Soup segment because we have the spiritual cash-up segment, so we will pace it accordingly. So let's get started. We are talking about lotus and the significance of the lotus flower and why it is so eulogized in our scriptures. That's what we've been talking about. So let's continue on that fascinating discussion that we've been having this week. Probably one more session to conclude this discussion tomorrow, but let's get started for today. I'm going to share my screen and then we shall get underway. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get started with our opening prayers. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. So Radhe Radhe, good morning, good evening once again to all of you. So let's get started. Just give me a sec. All right, so we'll start with our shloka. I'm going to recite it. We'll take 3 hands. We have a lot of content today. So we'll take 3 hands and then get started. Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate na sapapena padam patram ivambhasa. Let's take 3 hands and then we'll get underway.
Sandhya ji, Radhe Radhe, please go ahead.
Radhe Sandhya.
Radhe.
Radhe.
ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रम् इवाम्भसा.
Very nice. Thank you, Sandhya. Let's take the couple of other hands.
Radhe Radhe, Aparna ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe, Aparna ji.
Radhe Radhe. Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate na sapapena padmapatram evambhasa. Thank
Very
you.
nice. Thank you, Aparna ji.
Dinesh ji, Radhe Radhe. Yeah,
Radhe.
please go ahead. Sorry, I think I have not unmuted. Yes, please go ahead.
ब्रह्मणादाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रं विवाम्भसा. Radhe Radhe.
Thank you, Radhe Radhe. Rahul, go ahead. Rahul Rail. We can take Rahul. You hardly
Yes.
get opportunity. Go ahead, please. Last one.
Radhe Radhe, please go ahead. Yes.
Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe, Rahul.
Brahmanaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate na sa papena padmapatram ivambhasa. Radhe Radhe.
Very nice, Rahul. Thank you. Radhe Radhe. So let's get started. This shloka, Lord Krishna is saying, those who dedicate their actions to God, abandoning all attachment, remain untouched by sin, just as a lotus leaf is untouched by water. Let's do a quick recap of where we are. So we spoke about the laudable lotus. right? The lotus is very prominent in our Vedic scriptures, as we saw, and poets use it when they have to call out something significant or they want to eulogize something, like the lotus feet, Charan Kamal of God. You see, lotus is there, and then Kar Kamal, the hands, and then even Kamal Nayan, the eyes are also um, referred to as lotus. Anything that is worth some special mention, which is different from others and calls for special attention, is referred to as lotus, as we can see here, right? So, and it is because lotus has quite a few astonishing properties that we spoke about. It grows in the mud, we saw that. Then it comes out of the water and it faces towards the sun. Similarly, from human life perspective, people grow in material world, which is kind of a mud. Then they have to rise above the material tendencies by attaching to and finally attach to divinity. So this is something we can learn from lotus. And it's also called pankaj, which means born from mud. And although it grows from mud, but it retains it beautiful attributes, which is it continues to look beautiful. And like our scriptures use this word liberally whenever they have to eulogize something. So I think a lot to learn from nature, specifically this flower. So let's move on. Then we spoke about the concept yesterday that as you see the water, it is untouched by water. So similarly, our soul, as we keep on deepening the Karam Yoga. So as you see Karam Yoga, we start building an enamel around us. So you keep on doing that, and then you get an upgrade where you can enjoy your upgraded version. And what is the significance of this upgraded version? You have some kind of a coating or immunity that you can enjoy from the worldly affairs. And what that means is bio. Okay, what is bio? It's like bring it on. Bring it on like what? Like you have water. Yeah, your water is there, but then a butter can float on top of it and can challenge water. I'm going to sit on your head and you can do me no harm, because it can just float. Right? Had it been milk, then it would have diluted its properties. Like when we come in contact with material world, our mind gets influenced or swayed by material influence. But once you are in this stage, then you are untouched. Like the lotus flower is untouched by water. Similarly, we can enjoy that status while operating in the world, insulating ourselves from the worldly happenings and seeing it in perspective, as opposed to getting implicated or getting absorbed or starting to participate in it by giving it a lot of mind space. So we just put it in perspective and we continue to operate effectively. That is the whole idea. Now, talking about bio, there's a biological name. There is a name that God gives to something. Then there's a name that that particular thing is called in other languages. So it reminded me of the name lotus, the biological name of lotus. Anybody knows that? It used to be in biology, called Nilambo nucifera, by the way. Right? Like Mangifera indica for mango and Homo sapien for humans. It's called Nilambo nucifera. Okay. Anyways, that was a bit of a trivia here. Now let's move on. You'll be wondering why this slide is gray. Okay, I'll explain you later, not now. So let's see a snake. It's a pretty deadly snake, as you can see, right? How can you neutralize this snake? Anybody think? I used to be, not used to be, I should say, but I am even now scared of two things. I mean, maybe more than two things, but these two things freak me out. One is water, anything more than 4 feet, even though I'm more than 4 feet, okay? And then second is dogs. And then my worst nightmare used to be a dog biting me inside the water. But then sometimes I used to wonder, we should collect, okay, if there are some animal activists or dog lovers, my apologies in advance. So I used to think, get all the dogs of the world on an island, and then just take their teeth off and claws off. Okay, then I'm perfectly okay with them. Okay, it's a pretty long stretch, wild imagination. But in this particular case, if you look at this snake, it has its fangs. Now, how do we neutralize such a ominous, poisonous creature? Okay, so let's say it's a snake, pretty deadly snake. And then we get a tooth extractor, okay? Somehow we get that. So if a snake would come to know, of course, it will also have this kind of an expression, right? What are you talking about? So let's put that expression to the snake's mouth and go ahead and extract all of its teeth. Okay. So as you see, how many teeth it had? Oops, sorry about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll extract all 6 teeth. Okay, this is why I have put the slide as gray, because teeth are white. Okay. If I had put white teeth on white slide, you wouldn't have seen it. If it were gray, I could have used that background. So let's say we extract these teeth, and that is how we can neutralize a very poisonous snake as well. Now, if you have a phobia of snakes, then that very sense of touching something which is reptile can freak you out. But if you think about it, without its fangs, the snake is harmless. Okay, it can do no harm to anybody. But why would we extract its teeth? We'll get to that now. Okay, so let's move on. Hold on to that thought for a minute. Okay. So yeah, while talking about teeth, our little one came and he's showing me his teeth. It looks like he broke one of his teeth as well. Quite a coincidence. Anyways, so let's move on. Talking about Karma Yoga. Now, it doesn't mean just to do your duty, but if that was the case, everybody would be a Karma Yogi. So if you think about this term, if you ask anybody in Bharat, they say we don't believe in all this, bhajan, kirtan, hocus pocus stuff. We do our work and we are Karma Yogis. So if that was the simple definition of Karam Yogi, anybody who's doing their work, or for that matter, even performing their duties, does that qualify as Karam Yoga or not? The answer is an overwhelming no. Okay, Karam Yoga is a pretty deep concept. So let's see what is the approach to work. So approach to work can have two aspects to it. If one just does their work, they are a karmi. Okay, they are karmi, not Karam Yogi as yet. Now, karmi is the one who's basically going through the regular stuff, money, education, computer, food, home, and all that stuff. That is how we lead our life, right? It's purely karma, nothing more than that. And it's definitely not Karam Yoga. Now, when we go about acquisition or pursuit of mundane worldly things, we do a mixed bag of things, some good, some not so good, some neutral kind of a thing. But that simply falls into the category of a karma. It's not a Karam Yoga at all. Okay. I think there was one boy who was traveling along with Swami Vivekanand, when he was coming to US, I think on a ship. And then Swami Vivekanand asked him, why are you going to US? What are you going to US for? So he said to do my undergraduate. And he said, what are you going to do after doing undergraduate? He said, I'm going to come back and then give ICS. Like it used to be like IES. So he said, okay, then what are you going to do by doing IES? He said, then I will get a good alliance. I'll get married. He said, okay, after that, what? And then he said, I'm going to do social and economic progress. I'll buy house and then we'll have kids and we'll have family, and then I will do economic progress as well in my job and stuff like that. And then he said, what are you going to do after that? Then he said, I'll settle my kids. And then she said, what are you going to do after that? He said, then I'm going to retire. He said, what are you going to do after that? He said, then I'll die. What else? So he said, is that the plan of your life is? So then that boy really thought, I mean, is that all what does that question mean? So the point is, if we simply go by the regular template way of life, as we are just performing a karma which could fall into these categories: good karma, bad karma. If we are not harming anybody, just going about our stuff, it could be good karma. But in the process, if we are harboring any bad sentiments or things like that, it could be a bad karma. But it simply counts as a karma. It's definitely not Karam Yoga. Okay. Now, on the other hand, the Karam Yogi is the one um, where your consciousness is one with divine consciousness. A pretty deep concept. Okay. Now, how do you unite your consciousness with divine? So to become a Karam Yogi, you have to, again, we have spoken about this concept multiple times, but I'll again reiterate it for the benefit of people who might not have joined those sessions. Anything that you do, you bring God into the mix, right? You're doing it for the pleasure of God or for the sake of God, or utilizing your skill to please God, because when we realize our potential or when we take steps towards realizing our potential or becoming a better version of ourselves, there cannot be anything more pleasing to God and Guru at that point. And when we do it with that consciousness, then we are doing Karam Yoga. So a Karam Yogi would bring God into the mix for every activity that they perform. It could be their the daily chores or going about their daily job or daily stuff that they do. They have a way to bring God into the mix for anything and everything they do, as opposed to thinking they are doing it for themselves and massaging their ego around it. Okay, so that's when it differentiates the regular karmi from a karam yogi. And then that is approach at work. The second aspect of it is approach to senses. In material condition, the senses are as strong as poisonous snakes. Okay, snake is back now. So they are like poisonous snakes because they are biting us. Our senses are actually biting us at this point. By you can call it as poisonous snakes, and we have already spoken about senses being like wild horses as well. Now, and then the poisonous snake is because each sense will drag you in its own direction, and then it will allure you to go for that short-term sense gratification, which in as per our scriptures is called prayas. That means something which is sweet to begin with, but poison in long run. Okay, so that is why our senses are called poisonous, because they are serving us poison, sugarcoating it and serving the poison to us. Okay, every sense. And Karam Yogi doesn't have to control his senses, for his senses are already engaged in the Lord's service. Now, if you look at it that way, think of it like other species. One sense is enough to bring about their downfall. Just one sense, right? With the sense of touch, an elephant is tamed. That is how he becomes captive. Because he's allured by the touch of a female elephant, and that is how he's dragged into the pit. By the sense of smell, I think the kasturi, the deer, that is how it is trapped as well, because it is searching for the smell, which is anyway coming from its own body, but that brings about its downfall. With the sense of sight, a moth actually merges into a fire. It cannot resist that temptation. With the sense of taste, a honeybee or a bee can get trapped inside a flower and get killed as well, because it cannot resist the temptation of sucking that nectar, which is very sweet, even though the flower is closing down. So one sense is good enough to bring about the downfall if you look at it for the species. And here as humans, we are given 5 of them. Five-fold risk is introduced in our life, right? So they are looked upon as snakes, and at least an analogy is given to in our scriptures as snakes. So if you look at it, Karmi, he has to deal with this snake, which is always there to bite it, right? All the 6 fangs, we saw those, we counted those, 4 plus 2, 6. 5 senses plus mind is also called a sense, because it is the governor of your senses. So technically you can count it as a 6th sense as well. However, when you neutralize these senses, basically you extract these teeth out. When you say extract these teeth out, that's where we'll have a bit of a discussion. I'd like to hear from you as well. What does it mean? How do you render these senses or render these senses harmless or neutralize them completely? How can you do that? Senses are still there. I think yesterday Poonam ji asked this question, right? As per Bhagavad Gita, the senses are the ones that we have to restrain. Now, in this case, are we talking about restraining these senses? Let's try to understand that a little bit. So going back to this one, right? We spoke about this snake who is pretty amused on the prospect of getting its tooth extract done. But these 6 tooth are nothing but these 6 senses that we are talking about. So if you extract them, they are rendered powerless. Okay. Now the question I want to pose is maybe a little bit of discussion before I'll give you another anecdote and then we move on to the next segment. Why are these fangs senses no longer dangerous for a Karam Yogi? Any thoughts on that? And how can you gradually neutralize it? They're not no longer dangerous. You can still live with these senses. You don't have to negate your senses at all. Yes, Sandhya?
Yeah, Radhe Radhe. Sandhya ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe. Senses are dangerous because they are of material nature and they can just drive us into the material world very easily. But the way to deal with them, or like removing these fangs, is to just dovetail them to what's God, and it'll get sorted automatically.
Yeah, dovetail it towards God. So
Yeah,
that
all desires, sensual desires for God, want to see him, want to hear him, and so on
Sure.
and so on.
No, good point. Let's build on that a little bit. Let's hear. I see Sam G is back. Let's hear from Shriramya. Shriramya, you wanted to add something, and Abaji is raised as well. Let's quickly take these hands and then we'll build on that a little bit. Yes, go ahead,
Yes,
Shriramya.
Sri Ramyaji, please go ahead.
Because the senses are no longer binding us to this world, and we will be operating in a mode of surrender. So we know that God has taken control of the mind and of the senses and of all. Like we are in His Sharan, so we need not worry about that.
True. Very true. Yeah. Yes, Abaji, you wanted to add something more?
Yes, Abaji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe. So I wanted to share an experience from in the class from being a lotus, right? Like your senses, you almost have to neutralize them by being a lotus, right? Nothing can stick on them, whether it's a sweet dish or whether it's your temptation, you need to neutralize it. So I'll give you an experience that just happened this morning. My daughter's laptop, right before her midterm, had started getting lines. And she said, how am I going to take my midterm? All I wrote to her was, be a lotus. Nothing can get in your way. So it's all about our senses. Whatever comes our way, it should not perturb us to go either way. So all you have to think about is, if I want a sweet, temptation of money, temptation of the next building, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, great. But don't let your senses or your mind here get deterred by your focus of where you need to keep your mind.
Good point. Very nice, Abaji. Very practical way of looking at it. Thank you for that. Last one, we'll take Samji and then we will build on top of it. Yes, Samji?
Yes, Radhe Radhe, Samji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe.
Radhe.
Senses are like the mind senses. They are insentient. They don't have their own power. Once you surrender to the God, and naturally your intellect has been purified, your conscience has been purified, so they don't have their we are beyond the control of Maya in that case. So they don't have their own power. That's what I think.
Mhm. I think all of you are right. You are just employing different lenses around looking at it, and all of you are right. And I'll just build on top of what you all said. Yes, Girishji, you wanted to add something?
Yes, Radhe Radhe, Girishji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.
I'll start with the other side of the coin, meaning like the senses are really essential part of our life. We actually need them in order to survive. Considering as an example of, let's say, I come from engineering background, so I'm talking in those terms, sorry. So let's say if we have a fire alarm in our house, while we are cooking, accidentally there could be some fire also produced, and we need that fire sensor actually to alert us, tell us like, hey, something is wrong. Otherwise, things away can go out of the whack. So while material creation, these elements are actually designed to alert us, let us know if we hear something, if we taste something bad or good, whatever. So they have a specific function. However, we can easily get into the rabbit holes of each of these sensors, get along with the infinite vision to it. So if we come up with an approach of understanding what their actually basic functions are, we can elevate ourselves to a higher level, attach it to the divine intentions of it, and then these things will become insignificant to us.
Great point, Girishi. And good to hear an engineering perspective on it. So unfortunately, I'm also an engineer. So let me build on what you said and also what everybody said. Yes, senses, they have a purpose that they serve, right? For example, if God had not given us sense of taste, then we would have absolutely no incentive to eat food. So we get some kind of a dopamine kick. So there's an incentive to engage in that sense for some specific purpose. Now, if we make the food taste and food only the primary goal of our life, that's our problem. That's a greed aspect of it, right? Where we don't understand that aspect of it and fall for it. Similarly, God has given us a sense, like you said, the fire alarm and all. It's only through our senses can we understand there is some danger, right? So He's given us amygdala, which triggers our flight or fight response whenever there's a danger. So that gets triggered as well. So yes, we are biologically designed, programmed, and our senses are a means to detect that kind of a, danger which is lurking out there for self-preservation. So there's a reason for everything. But then we take it a little further and use it to worry and stress about things which may or may not even happen, right? So it's our problem. So the point here is when we engage our senses in devotion, one part of it is our senses are such that they would always seek its objects, and it would reject an older object for a newer object only if it gets some kind of a higher pleasure from it. Okay. So when you start giving your senses the pleasure of devotion, which is not very apparent to begin with, it's more like a shreyas kind of a thing, then your senses could start rejecting it. And secondly, when you start putting your senses to for the spirit of serving God, then that is not a binding karma. That means now your senses are not actually derailing your spiritual journey or making you do more binding karma or making your sanskars, something that might not be productive for our spiritual journey. So you're dovetailing your senses, right? Your eyes, now you could watch a Netflix movie or you could watch a lecture. Your choice is there both the times. In your mind, either you can contemplate world or you can contemplate God. Through your ears, either you can hear the metal or the jazz or whatever you want to hear, or you could hear a bhajan and contemplate on God. So for tongue, either you can indulge in all kind of stuff that the market throws at you, or you could say, I'm going to offer it to God and have it as a prasad. So everything can actually be dovetailed towards God. It's a consciousness that you build over time. And when that happens, then then we don't have to negate their natural propensity. They seek their objects, but you give it a better taste, and those objects which are purifying, uplifting for them. We are not negating senses. In Gyan Yoga, they say, neti, just keep on negating everything, which is unnatural state for us as well. Our mind needs engagement. It has to attach itself to something. Chit aspect of our mind through senses gets attached to something and it hankers for it. So it's up to us to start training our senses to give it a better taste until it start relishing it. Right now, our senses may not relish it. You say, listen to bhajan and say, what kind of a boring thing it is. This is not because there's a problem in the bhajan. It is because of the defective senses that we currently have. Defective senses in the sense, if let's say somebody has jaundice and if you give them sugar cane, they will say tastes bitter. Is there a problem in sugarcane juice or the taste sense of the person who is suffering from jaundice? It's in the defective sense. The problem is there. Then what is the remedy? You keep giving that person sugarcane juice. Then what will happen? It will cure the jaundice and then eventually it will start tasting sweeter as well. So same thing happens on the path of devotion. We start dovetailing our senses towards spiritual things. And then it's just a matter of time before it'll start relishing that taste and it'll reject the previous taste. And secondly, these senses, which were otherwise our biggest enemies, like I said, one sense is enough to derail our journey. Now they have started becoming powerless. If at all, they're actually helping your cause. Why? Because through senses, your mind keeps on getting programmed as well, right? What you are seeing, it's like the food that you are giving to your mind. There's one food that you give to your stomach, the other food you give to your mind through your senses only. What you are seeing, what you are thinking, what you are hearing, it's all food for your mind as well, right? So that is the way we can render it powerless over us, and in fact make it something which can actually help us uplift our spiritual journey. Pallaviji, real quick, you wanted to add something before I create the segue for the next segment? Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Nitinji. I just wanted to read out Pratyusha ji's message in the chat, which is almost the same what you were talking about. So she has mentioned we just lose interest in worldly things naturally that these senses can give once we get higher taste of bhakti.
True. Yes, Swami Vivekananda had also said that when you aim for the highest, the lower starts falling away all by itself. So yes, it's just a matter of time before it starts happening. You'll start losing interest and you'll start growing out of stuff um, that your senses previously used to enjoy. It's a matter of it's a natural order of progression, so to say, on this path. Now, one may say, really, can we are material in nature, and can we, conquer this material allurements just by our self-effort alone? The answer is no. Okay. Now, there was a guy who goes to Guruji and says, Guruji, you know what? I've been doing spiritual practice and I'm hankering for a spiritual experience. Can you please give me a spiritual experience? He said, if I give you right now, when you're not ready for it, you may even collapse and faint. He said, yeah, I just need that. Okay. He said, okay, then you'll have to do something. He said, what? He said, just go out and start praying to the heavens to give you a spiritual experience. So he goes out, he was in his office attire that day, and he goes out and he raises his hand and start praying to God in the open sky. He continues to do that. Nothing happens. Cloud cover comes and it starts raining. It starts pouring and he's all wet. Nothing happens. Then he comes back to the Guruji. He said, Guruji, you told me to cry out, and then the sky cried out on me. Look at my state right now. So he said, how are you feeling right now? He said, I'm feeling like an utter fool right now. He said, that's your first spiritual experience. So the point here is, and that spiritual experience is enabled through grace. And that grace came through rain that day. And that grace can come in a lot of ways in making us realize things and could catapult our spiritual journey in many ways as well. So grace is an important ingredient even to neutralize these senses. And that is going to be the topic. I think we are going to expound, not we, I mean, Cash is going to expound more in the spiritual cash up segment that I'm going to have. Yes, Girish, you wanted to add something before we move to our next segment? I just set the segue for the next segment that we're going to have. Go ahead, Girish, please, real quick.
Please
Radhe
go ahead.
Radhe. Yeah, sorry, would like to mention real quick a few things. So from my experience, I read about Amitabh Bachchan like around 40 years ago, his interview, and somebody asked him like, how could you survive and thrive into this corrupt industry? And he mentioned that I'm part of the industry, but I'm actually not. So he's not involved in any of the nonsense happening in the industry, but he still could thrive. Similar example if is of Raja Janak, who was Mother Sita's father, and he was actually real sannyasi, but still living Purushartha life. So that's an example. And
Sure.
one more thing, sorry. Just wanted to share in the statistics about snake bite. So actually, people do not get sick. Majority of the people do not get sick with the snake bite. They get sick with the fear of getting the snake bite.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair thing. Yeah, that reminds me of a story where there was a guy, who died not of the gunshot, but because of the heart attack he had hearing that gunshot. Thank you, Girishi. Yes, I think Amitabh Bachchan's senses did not believe in, they were able to discriminate between sense and nonsense, right? That is what helped him survive in that industry. So that's a good catch. With that said, let's move on to our next segment, which is spiritual cash ups, all yours, Cash. So looking forward to what you have in store for us today. I'm going to stop share and hand it over to you.
Radhe Radhe, everybody. Thank you once again for this blessed opportunity of bringing you some of Maharaji's teachings. So let's get into it. Take a look at these beautiful ducks gliding along on the water very elegantly and with poise. And then take a look under the water, where the situation is very different. They're paddling away furiously, but you can't see any of that when you look at them from up top. So
there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface, but it's not, you can't perceive it externally. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. And today we're going to be talking about persevering on our Purusharth as part of Grace of God. And it's episode 4, and this will be the concluding section of this chapter. So let's get into it. As always, we'll recap and ruminate on the grace of God. And fair warning, today the scale is tipped on the side of ruminate. That's why there's grass with the cow. So episode 1, we said our guru's advice, you have to do bhakti to receive bhakti. And what did that mean? We said we have to first identify our existing graces so that we can utilize those existing graces, and that will get us more grace. And you continue that cycle if you want to keep progressing, and that gets you more grace, more gratitude, and more growth. So the takeaway from here was you have something, but if you don't want to be satisfied with that, you want to keep progressing, you have to keep building on it. In the second episode, we looked at the concept of doership, right? We talked about the Thur doer. We said, if we imagine ourselves as Krishna's flute, today the music doesn't flow because there is an obstruction. And that obstruction is in the form of our ego or pride, selfish desires, misaligned will. And we said, if we want that music to flow, if we want to align our will, we have to work on removing that obstruction. Then last week, we talked about the faithful free will. So we said with free will, we get choices. And we can either make base level compulsive choices, or we can be more thoughtful about it and make higher choices. So here's a thought. If you're hungry, someone else eating food on your behalf is not going to satiate your hunger. Yes. Similarly, our guru has shown us a path, but he is not going to walk it for us. He cannot walk it for us, right? If you look at all the orange words here, they're all doing words. They're verbs. You have to utilize, you have to work on something, you have to make better choices. What this is telling us is, for the grace of God, spiritual progress, you need self-effort. It's not the only thing you need. You need the grace of Guru, but you're not going to get anywhere further without your own self-effort. So as I was looking back over, the rest of grace of God, this is what, this was the distilled message that clearly came through for me. And so I thought this is one thing we need to talk about here. So continuing on with ruminating on free will, we said at the base level, we make decisions which are based out of our automatic responses. And in a sense, that's not really free will because you're not even trying to make a choice. It just happens. On another level, you can make decisions based on more thoughtful reflection. And there used to be an American philosopher called Harry Frankfurt, and he has a theory called the influential theory about free will. He was a moral and free will philosopher. And his concepts line up pretty well with this. So he says we have first order desires. So those are our basic sanskars, the subtle impressions that we come in with, our compulsive tendencies. And then we have second order desires, which are desires about the first order desires. So what is that? Let's look at it with a couple of examples. Let's say, the urge to scratch something, that's a very basic thing we all have, right? So let's say you have a wound that itches and you feel like I want to scratch it right now. That would be your first order desire. But then your second order desire would be, if I scratch it, I'm going to, poke at the scab and it's going to be a bloody mess. So let me resist that urge for now and go grab some ointment or something and soothe it that way. So you're taking some time to think about your compulsive tendency, and you're making an intentional decision not to go that route and do something better instead. So this is your second order desire about your first order desire. Another example. Let's say you want something salty and crunchy. Did you notice I'm steering clear of controversy? And there's going to be no laddus or rasgullas in this deck. So salty and crunchy. So you want to reach for a bag of potato chips, right? That's your base level desire. But then you think to yourself, trying to make healthier choices, let me go grab some nuts instead. So all this to say, and Harry Frankfurt, that this is what he advocates to achieve a free will worth having, that you can actually use, that you're actually using, you have to align with your second order desire, right? You have to get to that point where you're thinking about the choices you have before you actually just go down your natural path. So then we talked about free will versus fate. We said the consequences of actions performed with free will in past lives are called fate in the present life. And then we said, in this way, whatever we do today in our present life will be fate in the future. We talked about our whole infinite baggage of karma from all our countless past lives. That's Sanchit karma. And then we said, when we're getting ready to dive into our next lifetime, we get given a portion of our karma. We don't know which portion that is. We don't understand that part, but we get something. That's our prarabdha that we are supposed to bear the consequences of in this particular lifetime. And then we said in our current lifetime, therefore, we have this prarabdha that we came in with, and then we are given a stash of free will, which we use to do our own self-effort, which is called purusharth. And that also begets new karma, which we said is called kriyaman karma. And then you get a new suitcase to put that karma in, which you take back with you to add here. So we don't know what to do about this. This is done, gone, it's here. Can't help that. What we can help is the current lifetime, right? So let's double click into that. What we'll try to do is, we have all of these teachings from our gurus, right? Let's try to map what we can to this whole flow within our current lifetime. And what better place to start? Not focusing on the things that are within our control. Those are the things we can actually do something about, which is this portion, of course, our free will, our self-effort, and what new karma we're building. So again, we said free will, first order desires. Now, I think last week someone asked the question, God has given us a new lifetime to fulfill our desires. Well, our gurus tell us it's not really for fulfilling our desires. It's for the pursuit of divine love. And so we ask ourselves the question, do we want to continue operating at this level and use this human birth to chase material desires, which all of the saints and everyone who's been through this life cycle keep telling us it's endless. It's an endless pit, this chain of desires. If this is what we want to do, then we can make choices based on our tendencies and fulfill our own desires. Then there's nothing much else to be done. But if we want to go to the level of our second order desires and go into higher consciousness, we have to make the decision. Do we want to make meaningful spiritual progress to extricate ourselves from that cycle of birth and death to attain divine love? And if so, we have to make choices per our guru's teachings and the divine knowledge that we're learning, right? And I will make a safe assumption that all of us are here for a reason. I think we're getting tired of doing this. And so let's get that out of the equation altogether. So then what happens when you start part by part making choices per your guru's teachings and your divine knowledge? Now you can channel and refocus that into your self-effort, right? With that, what happens is we're working on the purification of our mind. We're incrementally doing this antakaran shuddhi. Also, in our self-effort, we can start the practice of karma yoga that we talked about for so long, for the past few weeks. And what will that do? That will minimize our accumulation of binding karma, right? So you have fewer things to pack in your suitcase to take back. So this is all the things we can do with things that are within our control, but we cannot just ignore the fate part, right? That plays into our life. So What about this combination? Let's talk about that for a second. Now, fate, we don't know what we brought in the bags. That's just what we brought. And we interact all the time with so many people, and they have their own bags and they have their own free will. So with all these variables, how can we ever know if what's happening is a product of our free will or their free will or partly fate on whose part? It's too much of a complication. So it's this variable interplay, it's incomprehensible to us. And I don't think we're expected to understand that part. This is where that prasad buddhi comes in, right? So all in all, if you think about it, we have so many different avenues where we can put these teachings into practice. That's also just a realization that comes out of this when it comes to self-effort. So really, we can start wherever we want, and we can continue wherever we want. And each of these little things is going to help. Every little counts, right? So that was a thought here. Now we get into this last part of the grace of God, right? This is where it ties everything together. So Maharaji serves up a warning. He says, what happens if we concoct philosophies or we distort or misinterpret truth and teachings? He says we end up making excuses. And those excuses can come in two forms. It could be wrongful actions where now you're shifting blame onto other things. There's finger pointing going on. Or it could be in the form of inaction, which means you're just sitting back and waiting for things to happen and you're not making any self-effort. And then he talks about three different pitfalls. So the first one is when you're using fate to justify what's happened or fate to justify your inaction. So for example, you could say, my circumstances forced me to do this. But then we're conveniently forgetting that our current circumstances are consequences of past decisions. Or you could say, if it is in my fate, my spiritual progress will happen. So this is how we're using fate as a justification or an excuse. The other thing could be time. We could say this happened because I'm going through a bad time, I'm going through a bad period in my life. Or if you're not doing anything, you could be thinking, when the time is right, this will happen. When the time is right, God will grace me. The third thing is we might point fingers at God and say, nothing happens without God's will. So therefore, this must be his will and he's to blame. Or if you're not doing anything, we could say, when God wishes it, it will happen. When God wills it, I'll make my spiritual progress. So this is what he warns us to be aware of and not fall into these pits. So what does he say to do instead? So we looked at all these three things we could use as excuses, right? When it comes to wrongful action or shifting blame, he says, since we are serving God and Guru, putting up a facade or trying to hide our mistakes is a detriment, and it will eventually result in our downfall. So it's best to be humble and admit our mistakes. We're works in progress. We're not expected to be perfect. As far as inaction goes, excuses for lack of effort, he talks about tushti. Tushti means santushti, contentment. And it's interesting how a lot of the time the spiritual realm works exactly opposite to the material realm. So he says we should always be contented with the material aspects of life. Don't chase material desires. But we should never be content with swadhyay, which is the study of scriptures, or dan, which is charity, or dhyan, which is meditation on the pastimes of God. So this is his advice regarding being careful not to fall into this trap. So now we move to a really cool analogy, and I'll tell you why it's really cool. So imagine we are in we're not in a temperature control room. There is a temperature control room that's currently at minus 40 degrees Celsius. If you're a fan of Fahrenheit, my apologies, but we'll stick to Celsius for now. Imagine there's an ice cube inside that room that's temperature controlled, right? And imagine you start increasing the temperature of that room. So as the temperature increases, in the beginning, there's no perceptible change in the ice cube. So you keep increasing the temperature, and yet there is no perceptible change in the ice cube. And you keep increasing the temperature, and still no change in the ice cube. Let's say you're at minus 20 degrees Celsius now. The room is heating up. But do you see any change? Not yet. The ice cube is just as it was. You keep increasing the temperature, still no change. It's been a while, right? It's been a while, but there's no change. Now you're moving towards 0 degrees and you've reached 0 degrees Celsius. And now something interesting happens. You reached the melting point of ice, and now you've made the breakthrough. And now the ice cube starts to melt. So the point here is, just like the ducks that were furiously paddling under the water and we couldn't see it, there's change happening, but we're not able to see it. So few takeaways from this analogy. And because of the ice, that's why it's really cool. The heating can be mistaken for a tushti, right? We could think, if it is my fate, the ice will melt. When the time is right, the ice will melt. If God wills it, the ice will melt. That's not going to happen. There's heating that needs to be happening for the ice to melt. And that heating will only happen incrementally with our self-effort. Those changes may seem imperceptible because they are happening internally. We don't understand on the outside that they're happening. But yesterday, Nitinji just touched upon this FIR that could be used as a yardstick. You could see a change in the frequency, intensity, or the recovery of your changes within you. But then when we're not seeing changes on the outside, it's easy to get dejected, right? So how do we keep from losing hope? So our guru has assured us. He says there are no guarantees in the material world. If you're making efforts for material desires, there's no saying whether you get it or not. But if you're making pursuits or efforts towards attaining God, it is not a question of if, but a question of when, because it's 100% guaranteed that one day, if you keep your efforts at it, you're going to make it. So those are the takeaways from this analogy. And this is in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he uses it in terms of, in the context of building habits incrementally, but it serves up as a perfect analogy for what we are trying to do here. So for a second, let's take a step back and think about what are we doing this self-effort for, right? So in my line of work, we use this technique called the 5 why analysis. And it is a practice of asking why repeatedly, for getting beyond the symptoms to the root of something. So if we ask ourselves, why are we identifying existing graces? We can say that we're doing that so that we can utilize those graces. And why are we doing that? So that we get more devotion and attachment with God. And why do we need that? To remove our ego, pride, and selfish desires. And what's that for? Why? To make better free will choices. And why do we need to do that? It all boils down to we're trying to purify our mind. Right? That's the essence of this whole thing. So we always say applied knowledge is power. Maharaji leaves us with this thought. God is not whimsical. He's not unpredictable. He's not unusual. He has a certain condition he needs fulfilled. Next time we'll start looking into what that condition is, but I think we got a pretty good hint today. So as far as practice making progress, let's focus on our mind and make intentional and non-compulsive decisions. And today I will not leave you with a punchline, I'll leave you with a poem. The fisher who draws in his net too soon won't have any fish to sell. The child who shuts up his book too soon won't learn any lessons well. If you would have your learning stay, be patient, stick with it and hold fast. The man who travels a mile a day may get round the world at last. So let's keep persevering until the ice on our hearts melt. That's the thought I want to leave you with. That concludes this segment, and that concludes the chapter Grace of God. As always, thank you for your patience and attention. Radhe Radhe.
Outstanding. Cash, like always. I think personally, I've never come across a more structured way of talking about the Kriyaman, free will, the grace of Guru and all that, that and nice framework that you had created and stitched it all together. So fantastic. I think you can take a screenshot of it and put it on your walls. It would serve as a good reference on what we should be really focusing on a day-to-day basis. So superb is all I would say. Let's hear from a couple of participants. Yes, so we'll keep a time check as well. We have 10 minutes, and if you want a devotional segment, we have technically about 7 minutes before we move on to our next segment. Feedback tracker is on for your comments or any follow-up questions that you may have. But yes, maybe a few seconds each. Go ahead, please. The hands that are raised. Go ahead, Sri Ramya, starting with Sri Ramya.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Radhe Radhe. I'm holding my phone. Otherwise, I would have lifted my hands, done this, and said, take a bow in Virat Kohli style. I was, every time I thought I'm taking a screenshot, there was more to the slide coming. I ended up taking screenshot after screenshot and accidentally with the power button, I happened to leave the session twice also. That was the speed at which I was taking the screenshots. Now I want to share it on my WhatsApp status with Cashji's permission and ask my other friends also to join this without fail. And the analogies were amazing. You have definitely carried out a lot, even from your past life. Otherwise, there's no ways that so quickly you get to this stage of realization. The first time when I met you, you were so quiet, but now I was like, okay, I was with a guru and I didn't know it was her. Oh, you know a lot, Kashji, and thank you so much. And Nitinji's sessions plus Kashji's spiritual cash up, it's really an amazing combination and a place to be. Thank you.
Yes, I think the X factor, like I always say, is your personal anecdotes around, thinking through this whole thing, and then that is how that presentation can flow with the impact that it has. So keep it up. Yes, Nilesh's hand I'm seeing after a while. So go ahead, Nileshi.
Radhe Radhe. Nileshji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe. Oh my God. My journey started with JK Yoga, attending Nitin's classes, and the concept that got hooked me was Karma Yoga and then the whole graphical representation. And I've revised that hours and hours, and still I have it on my laptop. But what you just did in last 15 minutes, I was thinking, what is going on? What am I thinking? So it all refresh of last 1.5 year, all concepts tied together, and how you explain it beautifully. It came up very, very nice. You also take my daughter's class on Friday, so I think she also talks how you explain it very nicely. I said, yeah, I think it's the same person, but now I know it is the same person because the slides are very similar. Yeah. So thank you for whatever you do. Yes.
Yes, so just to let you know, she takes kids Bhagavad Gita class as well. So if you have little ones whom you would like to get trained on Bhagavad Gita, you cannot have a better instructor, right? As you can see. So thank you, Nilesh, for that. Yes, Sandhya, go ahead.
Thank you. Sandhya ji, please go ahead. Yeah, Radhe Radhe.
Oh yeah, Radhe Radhe. Kashdi, this time no words of encouragement or appreciation from my side, because I think that I cannot say, it's indescribable. But this time a question actually. So the second order response requires us to put our thinking hats on. And at times we end up overthinking. There is analysis by paralysis, right? So how to kind of draw a line over there?
I don't think there should be any analysis paralysis because our gurus have made it so easy for us. Just follow their teachings. If it's anything related towards God, channel towards God, towards devotion, it's correct. If it's not, it's not. I don't think we have to analyze anything. Yeah.
That was a very long answer to a short question. So maybe a little more discussion around on the question and the context where we get. So it would maybe a little nuanced discussion you can have offline. Let's hear from other hands as well. Archana ji, you wanted to add something? Then we'll come to you.
Radhe Radhe. Archana ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe. First wanted to thank Kashji. This was amazing. And this is the second time I'm hearing your presentation and it was so mind-opening. But I have a question and it's okay if we can discuss in the next one. And that question keeps bothering me is, I know that we have a free will to make choices, but then we have our prarabdha also based upon we are destined to certain experiences in life or situations. So does my free will or the choices that I'm making are influenced by my future prarabdha destination? I hope I am making sense in asking the question.
If that was the case, then Krishna would have never told Arjun yathechhyasi tatha kuru. He would have
Mhm.
said, it's already fixed based on your future prarabdha, so there's no point in listening to Bhagavad Gita. So it's like this, your sanchit is like the quiver you are carrying,
Mhm.
right? Where you carry the quiver with a lot of arrows in it. So one of those arrows will get picked and get shot. That becomes your prarabdha. What you put on the tip of that arrow would be your kriyaman, right? How you're going to utilize it. So you always have a free will. If you think about it, it's not that free will also programmed based on, something which is already
Yeah.
predestined for future. So no, free will is a choice you can make at any point. Otherwise, God would program it and make all of us God realized. Why does he have to make us go through all this grind?
Right. But can my free will choices impact my future coming in this present life?
Yeah, of course.
That's
What you
okay.
end up getting in this life is a combination of your prarabdha and kriyaman, right? Few things are preordained by prarabdha, but then through your free will God has given us, so it certainly has a power to influence that as well.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Your kriyaman would become your future prarabdha, right? So
Yes. That I understand. Yeah.
that you can control through your good choices. Yeah, so free will is totally free in that sense. Yeah. Thank you, Archana ji. Yes, Rahul, go ahead. Maybe we can conclude our discussion today. We'll go a little
Yes.
more. Yes, Rahul.
Please go ahead,
We can
Rahulji.
keep our
Radhe
question
Radhe.
segment. Yeah, go ahead, Rahul.
Radhe Radhe. I just wanted to say Radhe Radhe Govind Radhe. ग्रेस के कॉन्सेप्ट को स्पिरिचुअल कैशअप की अति सुंदर एनालॉजी से समझा दे. राधे राधे. माइंड ब्लोइंग सेशन.
Yeah, very true. Thank you, Rahul. You sum it up very nicely. So what I would say is, whatever we do in Bhagavad Gita, we anyway go very slow, right? But if that is also something you want to do catch up, come to spiritual catch up. Okay, you'll get a condensed summary of it in 30, not even 30 minutes, 25 minutes of what all we have done in 2.5 years. Okay, great. Aparna ji.
Please go ahead, Aparna ji.
And then
Radhe
quick
Radhe.
Keshav ji
Radhe Radhe.
we'll take, and then we will keep a time check
You
as
can
well.
hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually spellbound. Such a comprehensive presentation, Kashji. I like the ice cube example. That was great. Just like I like the example that Swamiji gives, bamboo example. It takes like 5 years to grow. That is a good one. I also, you actually kind of laid out a formula. So I really like that. A very clear presentation. Thank you so much.
So a lot of happy faces. It's like, okay, something has clicked today. I think it answers the question that Preeti ji was also asking yesterday, that, change is not happening. Yes, ice, the temperature, let's not quit just before 0 degrees centigrade. That is the biggest tragedy, right? Just before it was supposed to melt. So let's continue. As long as we are taking the fundamentals, it's just a matter of time, like she said, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Yes, last one, Keshav ji, real quick. We have 2 minutes
Yes.
and then we'll wrap up our session. Yeah.
Keshav ji,
Radhe
Radhe Radhe. Please go
Feedback
Radhe
tracker,
Radhe.
please to fill it out if you have any questions or anything more. If you didn't get an opportunity, fill out the feedback tracker, which we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll have a concluding session on this particular shloka as well. Yes, Keshav ji, real quick.
Radhe Radhe. Analyzing, sorry, Cash, I'm sorry to say, analyzing is a must. We need to analyze. I'm in this field for 25 years, and I have heard each and every spiritual leader saying Gita is easier to understand and Upanishads are difficult to understand. Sorry, Gita is most difficult to understand. That's why the world is still not united. If people go deeper and understand it, the world is united. There is no doubt about it. There is no doubt about it.
Agreed.
Radhe Radhe.
Analysis is needed, but analysis paralysis isn't needed.
Basically, when I spend most of time with Vedantis and Upanishads and everything, everywhere. So last Saturday, there was a get-together one-to-one with the spiritual teacher of that field for 3 hours. There were questions and answers. And I heard all the questions and answers. So, sorry, but yes,
So
Yeah,
it
we
is
should not
called,
have blind faith. No blind follower. No blind following, I mean to say.
yeah,
Radhe Radhe.
we're looking at it from different lens. From a scriptural standpoint, it is called Prasthantrai. Vedanta sutras are very, very esoteric. Okay, you can't understand them. You come to Upanishads, they are also aphorisms, even more difficult to understand. And Gita is something which is more made palatable for us by Lord Krishna. And that is our gateway to spirituality. If you want to really go about it, understanding the cream of Upanishads, right? Like, it is a beautiful shloka where they say that Sarva Upanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandana. So Krishna has actually distilled the entire milk. If entire script body of literature of our Vedas is like a cow, he has taken the milk out of it, and Arjun is drinking it, and so are we right now. So yes, Gita is a wonderful scripture.
I agree with you. But this is all the scriptural teachers are telling us. But my opinion is totally different. It's the other way around. Upanishads and everything has come from Gita. Bhagavad Gita, they refer it came 5,300 years ago. But Purushottam Krishna said, when this creation was done, it was spoken at that time to sun god.
Vivaswan.
So you know about that. So it was spoken to sun god, and he had to come again in the Dwapar that to repeat it. So people don't start from there. They start from 5,003 years ago, and they say what we have said. That is one aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Keshavji. So with that said, we had a pretty fascinating discussion again today. We've run out of time today. We'll try to make up for it in our devotional segment tomorrow. But just want to remind you, we will to the point. Am I muted? Very succinct and a beautiful presentation, and making it so engaging and just driving home the point so beautifully. So thank you, everybody. Please fill out the feedback tracker if you didn't get an opportunity to ask a question or provide feedback on today's session. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Radhe Radhe. Good night. Good day from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nitinji, for another awesome session. Thank you, everyone. Stay blessed. Radhe Radhe.